I need to get this off my chest because for months I felt like I was slowly being erased at work. And the worst part? It wasn't some shadowy hacker or a random IT glitch. It was someone who sat 10 feet away from me every day. Someone who smiled when we bumped into each other at the coffee machine. Someone who, if you asked anyone in the office, looked like the kind of guy you'd trust to water your plants while you were on vacation. I'm a project coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. Not glamorous, but steady. My job is simple on paper. Keep client deliverables on track. Keep communications clear. Make sure nothing slips. In reality, it's high stakes. One mistake in a requirements doc. One missed CC, and you can kiss a six-figure renewal. Goodbye. Clients don't care who made the mistake. They just see our logo on the header. That's why I document everything. Notes in meetings, email trails saved in folders, version histories. Some people joke that I'm paranoid organized. I've always thought of it as survival, which is why when the first error popped up, my stomach dropped. It was tiny. A calendar invite for a QA review had been sent under my name, but the time was wrong. Half the team missed it, which delayed testing by a day. Annoying, but not catastrophic. I got a polite email from my supervisor. Please double-check times before sending invites. Thing is, I hadn't sent that invite. I checked my sent folder. Nothing. Checked deleted items. Nothing. But there it was in everyone else's inbox with my name at the top. I chalked it up to Outlook being Outlook. But a week later, it happened again. This time, an attachment was missing from a client deliverable. A teammate pinged me. Hey, you forgot the appendix? I hadn't. I'd attached it. I even had the draft with the file path in my drafts folder. But in the version that reached the client, no attachment. Guess whose name was on the email? You start second-guessing yourself. Did I forget? Did I rush? Stress makes you misremember. But I knew. I knew. That's when I started noticing little things. My inbox would show a message as read, even though I hadn't opened it. Drafts I didn't remember saving. An auto-forward rule I swore I never created. And then him. Let's call him Mark. On the surface, Mark was the helpful neighbor type. He brought donuts sometimes. He cracked bad puns in meetings. He offered to lighten my load by reviewing drafts before I sent them out. Everyone liked him because he was easy to like. But I caught him once, not in a way I could prove. Not yet. I came back from lunch earlier than expected, and his monitor reflected in the glass partition. My inbox, my name, my emails open on his screen. He alt-tabbed so fast I might have convinced myself I imagined it, except I didn't. 2 days later, another mistake appeared. A requirements doc had the word must quietly swapped for optional. The client caught it, furious, and escalated. Management pulled me into a call, asking how I could miss something so basic. I wanted to scream that I hadn't, that someone was tampering. But try saying, my coworker is secretly spying on my emails and sabotaging me without sounding paranoid. So I stayed quiet. I nodded, apologized, promised to improve my review process. Then I went home, stared at my ceiling until 3 a.m., and decided I wasn't crazy. I wasn't going to let him bury me. I was going to get proof. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing was wrong, smiled at Mark when he said, "Rough call yesterday, huh?" He even offered me one of his donuts, like a peace gesture. I took it, smiled back, ate half. And the whole time, I was planning. Because if he wanted me to look incompetent, I'd let him think I was, just long enough for the trap to snap shut. Once you start looking for a pattern, you see it everywhere. At first, I thought I was being obsessive, refreshing my sent folder, double-checking metadata, setting alarms to remind myself when emails should have gone out. But within a week, I had undeniable proof that something was off. It started with a forwarded thread. A client had sent over updated branding guidelines, minor tweaks, hex code changes, nothing dramatic. I saved them into our shared folder, replied with acknowledgement, and moved on. Except 2 days later, my supervisor asked why I hadn't shared them with the design team. I pulled up the thread, ready to defend myself, and there it was. The email I'd written, forwarded under my name, but with the crucial PDF stripped out. The subject line was identical. My words, verbatim. Only difference? The missing attachment. I confronted myself in that moment. Maybe I clicked the wrong file. Maybe I dragged but didn't drop. But when I dug into Outlook's message trace, I saw 2 entries for the same email ID. One at 9:12 a.m., the one I sent. One at 9:26 a.m., a second version, same sender, slightly altered. Except I hadn't been at my desk at 9:26. I was in a conference room. That's when the paranoia turned into certainty. Someone was inside my inbox. I tested it with bait. I created a draft email addressed to no one. Subject line, confidential, draft budget notes. Inside, I typed gibberish numbers and fake line items. I saved it, didn't send, and locked my screen. When I came back from a restroom break, the draft had been opened and auto-saved again. 2 minutes later, I hadn't touched it. Someone had. And then came the sent from my phone trick. A colleague asked why I'd emailed them at midnight with a sloppy typo-laden reply. I hadn't, but the message had my signature. Sent from Outlook Mobile. Except I don't even have Outlook installed on my phone. It wasn't just sabotage. It was psychological warfare. Every mistake chipped away at my credibility, and every time I defended myself, I risked sounding delusional. That's the genius of it. You can't run to IT screaming, "He's reading my emails," without evidence. Otherwise, you're the problem. Meanwhile, Mark was thriving. He'd drop casual comments in meetings like, "Hey, maybe double-check the attachments this time," followed by a chuckle, and everyone laughed. When a deadline slipped, he'd pipe up, "I can step in if you're overwhelmed." Always polite, always framed as help. The kind of help that makes you look like you need saving. I couldn't tell anyone yet. Not my manager, not HR, not even the one coworker I trusted. If Mark suspected I knew, he'd cover his tracks, maybe even flip it on me. So I played dumb. I let the little mistakes keep happening. Outwardly, I looked frazzled, apologetic, even clumsy. Inside, I was cataloging everything. I started keeping a parallel evidence log, screenshots with timestamps, server traces, even photographs from my phone when I caught odd discrepancies. I set rules on my inbox to auto-forward silent copies of all outgoing mail to a private archive only I could access. I tracked when messages were marked as read, and every single time, the anomalies lined up with one person's schedule. Mark's late nights in the office, his coffee breaks when I was away, the times he volunteered to help. The emotional toll was brutal. I'd lie awake replaying every detail. My appetite was gone. At work, I avoided eye contact with teammates because I could see it in their faces. They thought I was slipping. And honestly, a small part of me started believing it too. That's what scared me most. He wasn't just sabotaging my work. He was erasing my sanity. But the worst was when a QA error he engineered spiraled into a penalty. We missed a requirement in a client build, something I swear I had highlighted. When the bug slipped into production, the client issued a financial penalty clause. My director called me into his office. Calm, disappointed, the kind of tone that feels worse than yelling. "You've always been reliable, but lately, is something going on?" I wanted to scream, "Yes, something's going on. Someone's rewriting my work under my name." But instead, I said, "I'll tighten my process." He nodded, clearly unconvinced. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by printed logs, highlighter in hand. The pattern was clear as day. Tampering, targeted, deliberate. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being stalked in plain sight. And if Mark thought I'd crumble under the weight of mistakes, he underestimated just how stubborn I could be. The next move was mine. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing was wrong. On the outside, I was the same, slightly stressed but cooperative coworker. Inside, I was all steel. If Mark wanted me to look incompetent, I'd give him enough rope to hang himself, with my evidence attached to the other end. First step was invisible armor. I hardened my inbox. It has a feature most people don't bother with: detailed audit logs. Every access, every rule change, every session from an IP address outside my laptop was recorded. I toggled it on. Quietly. No ticket, no request for help, nothing that could alert him. Then I set up rules that notified me silently when anything in my account changed. He wouldn't know, but I'd know. Next, I prepared bait. I crafted what looked like a sensitive draft email to my manager, subject line: budget concerns, client escalation. Inside, I typed a fake note about how we'd need to reduce deliverables for cost reasons, and attached a blank PDF disguised as Forecast V3 PDF. It was a nothing file, but the kind of thing that would set off alarms if leaked. I saved the draft and left it there, like a tripwire. I also built something nastier, a canary token. Basically, a hidden tracker embedded in a harmless text file. If anyone opened it, I'd get an instant alert with their IP, time, and even the device fingerprint. It looked like a boring internal memo, but it was a live grenade. Then I waited. Mark was predictable. He always stayed late, long after most of us left, claiming he liked working in peace. I left at 6 p.m. that day, said a cheerful, "Good night, see you tomorrow," and walked out. But at 7:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Alert. Draft email accessed from device ID. M laptops 7. Not my laptop. He'd opened it. At 7:16, another ping. The canary file had been triggered. IP address, office network. Device, Mark's workstation. My heart pounded so hard I almost dropped the phone. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't losing my mind. I had proof. But proof is worthless if it isn't irrefutable. I needed more. So I layered traps over the next week. Dummy emails with altered dates. Hidden metadata in Word docs. Even subtle typos in drafts that I knew he wouldn't resist fixing before forwarding them on my behalf. Each time the alerts rolled in. Each time the logs tied back to him. The biggest trap came on Thursday. He'd been escalating, making me look careless in front of clients. I gave him something bigger to bite. I created a requirements doc with a crucial line highlighted. Feature X is mandatory for compliance. I saved it, then created a decoy version without the highlight and left it in a shared folder. The idea was simple. If he swapped the versions, the compliance check would fail and I'd have hard evidence of tampering. And he took it. Friday morning, my manager asked why the compliance line was missing in the client draft. I checked the file in the shared folder. Sure enough, the highlight was gone. But when I opened my private archive copy, the line was still there. Time-stamped, hash-matched, untampered. The change hadn't come from me. That was my moment of cold, quiet rage. He was bold now. Too bold. Outside of the technical traps, I was laying social groundwork, too. I stayed quiet in meetings, letting him talk over me. Let him volunteer to double-check my work. Let him smirk when little errors popped up. I even nodded along, like I was grateful. All while my evidence log grew thicker by the day. The hardest part was emotional. Pretending I didn't know while watching him chip away at me. He'd lean against my cubicle wall, casual as ever, and say things like, "Don't take it personally. Everyone's under pressure." Or worse, "If you need me to cover for you, just ask." That fake generosity burned more than the sabotage itself. But I kept my poker face, because I knew the day was coming when all his little edits and secret logins would line up into a noose. And when it did, he wouldn't see it coming. By the time the next week rolled around, Mark had become greedy. It wasn't enough for him to sprinkle small errors here and there. He wanted a grand failure, something big enough to tip me over the edge, something he could point at and say, "See, she's the problem." And he chose the perfect moment, our biggest client deliverable of the quarter. The stakes were enormous. A multi-million-dollar renewal hung on one requirements document that summarized months of work. Every line mattered. Every word carried weight. I stayed late that Tuesday night, polishing the draft, cross-referencing specs, double-checking formatting, making sure the compliance notes were bold and unmistakable. I saved the final version in my secure archive and synced it to the shared folder with a timestamp. Then I went home, exhausted but confident. The next morning, everything had changed. Our internal Slack lit up at 9 a.m. sharp. Urgent. Client says mandatory requirement for feature X is missing. Please confirm. My blood ran cold. That line wasn't missing. I knew it wasn't. I opened the shared file, and there it was, gone, as if it had never existed. I wanted to scream, but instead I closed the file, leaned back in my chair, and forced myself to breathe. Because this time, I wasn't unprepared. The log showed everything. The version with the compliance line existed, time-stamped at 10:43 p.m. the night before. The altered version saved at 11:18 p.m. under his account. I even had a silent screen recording running on my workstation overnight, capturing his remote login and the exact keystrokes he used to delete the line. It was perfect. It was devastating. It was enough to destroy him. But here's the part that nearly broke me. I had to let it ride. When my manager pulled me into a call, voice heavy with disappointment, I kept my face neutral. "I'll review my process," I said. I must have overlooked it. My chest was on fire, but I swallowed it down. Because if I revealed my hand too soon, he'd wriggle out of it. Claim shared workstation, corrupted file, anything. I needed him to believe he'd won. Meanwhile, Mark played his part flawlessly. He showed up in the meeting all wide-eyed and helpful, saying, "It happens to the best of us. I can step in to review the next draft, if that helps lighten the load." My manager nodded appreciatively. "That might be a good idea." And there it was, the knife twisting. That day was hell. Whispers spread. People avoided eye contact. One teammate who used to eat lunch with me sat with Mark instead. The shame wasn't just professional. It was personal. The office was small enough that everyone knew when someone was slipping, and as far as they could see, I was slipping. But every time my hands trembled, I reminded myself, this is evidence. This is the nail in the coffin. That night, I went home, spread the logs, screenshots, and screen captures across my desk like puzzle pieces, and matched them all together. The story they told was undeniable. Deliberate sabotage, targeted tampering, and a digital trail that pointed straight to him. I didn't sleep. I barely even blinked. I just watched the playback of him deleting that compliance line over and over, committing it to memory. His casual movements, the smugness of someone who thought he was untouchable. And when the sun rose, I felt calm. Not broken, not paranoid. Calm. Because for the first time, I had him cornered. He thought he'd buried me. In reality, he'd just dug his own grave. By Friday morning, the weight of it all was unbearable. The mistakes, the whispers, the looks from coworkers. It had reached a point where staying silent was no longer an option. If I didn't speak up, I'd be the one escorted out before the month ended. So I booked a meeting with my manager, just the two of us. I walked into his office, clutching my evidence log like a lifeline. My heart raced, but my voice stayed calm. "I need to raise a concern," I said, careful with every word. "I believe someone has been accessing my emails and making changes under my name." The silence that followed felt like a lifetime. He blinked at me, expression unreadable. Then he sighed. "That's a serious accusation." "I know. That's why I've been collecting evidence." I placed a folder on his desk, not the full arsenal, just enough to show I wasn't making it up. Metadata logs, screenshots, a copy of the altered compliance file side by side with the untouched version. He skimmed through, frowning. "This is concerning." But before I could press further, there was a knock on the door, and in walked Mark. Apparently, my manager had looped him in. "Since this involves both of you," he said, "I think it's best we talk openly." My stomach dropped. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not yet. Mark slid into the chair across from me, wearing his usual friendly mask. "What's going on?" My manager looked at me, gesturing for me to explain, so I did, carefully, laying out the anomalies without revealing my full evidence cache. I spoke in measured tones, no anger, no desperation, just facts. And Mark, he was ready. He leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Wow, that's a lot. I don't even know what to say. He gave a soft chuckle, like he was trying to lighten the mood. Look, I know things have been stressful lately. We've all noticed. But to suggest I'm somehow sneaking into your emails? He shook his head, pity in his eyes. That's pretty out there. My manager glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. Mark pressed on. I've actually been worried about you. You've seemed overwhelmed. That compliance issue, it happens. We all make mistakes. I even offered to help take some load off your plate. He turned to my manager, voice full of concern. Maybe she just needs some support, coaching. I'd be happy to step in more if that helps. The gaslight was textbook. He painted himself as the good guy, me as the frazzled one seeing shadows in corners. And the worst part? It was working. I could see it in my manager's eyes. Hesitation, doubt. For a moment, panic clawed at my throat. But then I reminded myself I had proof he couldn't talk his way around, proof I hadn't shown yet. So I swallowed the panic, forced a steady breath, and said, I understand how it sounds. That's why I want this documented formally. That changed the room. My manager straightened. Documented? Yes, I said firmly. Please open an incident record with HR, and I request IT preserve all mailbox and server logs, starting from last month. If I'm wrong, those logs will clear it up. If I'm right, they'll show exactly what's been happening. For the first time, Mark's smile flickered, just for half a second. But I saw it. My manager hesitated, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll open a case. But let's keep this professional, please. No accusations until we have the facts. Mark leaned forward, voice soft, almost patronizing. Of course, I just want what's best for the team. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I just gave a small nod and gathered my folder. Thank you for hearing me out, I said. Then I stood and walked out, leaving them in silence. Back at my desk, my hands shook. But it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Because I'd just bought myself 48 hours. 48 hours until IT pulled those logs. 48 hours until the trap I'd built for weeks snapped shut. I could play the villain for 2 more days. After that, the mask would slip, and not mine. Monday morning came heavy. The kind of morning where the air in the office feels too still, like even the fluorescent lights are waiting for something to happen. I walked in earlier than anyone else, with my evidence drive in my bag and a calmness that didn't feel like mine. For weeks, I'd been carrying around fear, humiliation, doubt. Today, I carried only certainty. At 10:01 a.m., we all filed into the conference room for what HR called a compliance review. That was the official label. Unofficially, it was Judgment Day. The cast, my manager, stone-faced, the HR rep tapping notes onto her laptop, an IT specialist who barely looked up from his tablet, Mark, smiling like always, leaning back in his chair with one ankle crossed over his knee, and me, folder on the table, hands folded calmly on top of it. The HR rep started. We've received reports of anomalies involving client deliverables. Today we'll review findings and determine next steps. She looked at me first. You may share your perspective. I kept my tone flat, professional. Over the last 6 weeks, documents and emails sent under my name have been altered without my action. I've logged metadata, access history, and server records that indicate another user has accessed my mailbox. I believe those alterations were deliberate and targeted. HR nodded. Thank you. We'll hear from IT. The specialist cleared his throat. We reviewed access logs. Ms. Thompson's account was accessed multiple times outside her working hours. Each session originated from device ID MLaptop07. He glanced up. That's registered to Mr. Carter. Mark laughed softly, shaking his head. Hold on. That's my laptop, yes, but we share a network. Sometimes files are cached. This could be a mix-up. I'd never... Please wait, I interrupted. He tapped his screen. The sessions showed direct login activity, not cached files. Credentials were used to alter documents and forward drafts, including this one. He projected an email onto the screen, my fake canary draft, opened from Mr. Carter's device at 7:16 p.m. on March 8th. The room went silent. Mark tried again, his voice louder now. Anyone could have sat at my desk, shared workstation. No, IT cut in. This was remote access, VPN session, credentials tied to your unique ID. I opened my folder, sliding out a page. Additionally, I set up a tracker in that draft. The access pinged from his machine, and I have a screen recording of him editing the compliance document. I slid the USB across the table. Time-stamped, logged, corroborated by server hashes. My manager leaned forward, his jaw tight. The HR rep's fingers froze on her keyboard. The IT specialist plugged in the USB. On the screen, there it was, the video. Mark's cursor moving through my document, deleting the compliance line, saving the altered version, his laptop name in the corner of the remote session, clear, undeniable. Mark's mask cracked. This is insane. You're framing me. I didn't even answer. I didn't need to. Then came the final blow. It pulled up another log, the canary file forwarded from my account to an external Gmail address. That address, as it turned out, was linked to a freelance profile belonging to his girlfriend. The metadata showed it had been accessed from her phone. The HR rep's face went pale. So not only were you tampering internally, you were forwarding confidential material outside the company? Mark slammed his hand on the table. This is a witch hunt. She's been after me since day one. I sat still, calm, watching the room pivot, the tide finally shifting. My manager's voice was low, measured, but it cut like a blade. Mark, you need to step outside. Now. Security appeared minutes later, as if they'd been waiting. He stood, red-faced, sputtering protests no one listened to. His eyes met mine for the first time without the smirk, without the charm, just fury. He muttered something under his breath, but it didn't matter. He was walked out, his badge deactivated before the door even closed behind him. The room stayed silent for a long beat after. Then HR exhaled, typing furiously. It kept his eyes down. My manager looked at me, not with pity, not with doubt this time, but with something closer to shame, for not believing me sooner. I leaned back, finally letting my chest rise in a full breath. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one under suspicion. Mark was gone, the truth was out, and this was only the beginning of his fallout. By the time I got back to my desk, the office already felt different. Word travels fast in a company our size. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about him. I caught the sidelong glances, the hushed voices. One coworker who hadn't met my eyes in weeks suddenly gave me a small nod of respect as I walked past. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet, because exposing him was only half the battle. The other half was making sure I wasn't left carrying scars while he disappeared into the wind. HR called me in the next morning. They started with the usual corporate disclaimers. We can't discuss details of another employee's case. We appreciate your professionalism. We take these matters very seriously. All the scripted lines. Then they pivoted. We'd like to move forward constructively. What do you need to feel supported going forward? That was my moment. I didn't smile. I didn't soften my tone. I laid it out clearly. 1. A written exoneration circulated to every client an internal distribution list that had received Mark's altered emails. My reputation had been dragged through the mud in front of them. I wanted it restored just as publicly. 2. Retroactive bonus pay for the projects that were penalized because of his sabotage. I could prove my deliverables were correct before he tampered with them, and I wouldn't accept financial loss for his actions. 3. A promotion, not out of spite, but because I had done the work of a senior coordinator under extreme duress, and I had done it flawlessly despite sabotage. The evidence spoke for itself. HR blinked, taken aback by the precision of my list. "We'll need to review these requests," the rep said carefully. I leaned forward. "Review them quickly, because if you don't, I'll be reviewing this entire case with an attorney, and I'll be forwarding my logs to the client compliance team. You know how that looks. Your company letting someone tamper with deliverables for weeks while ignoring complaints." Silence. Then my manager, who had been quiet until now, spoke. His voice was low, steady. "She's right. Make it happen." And that was that. Within a week, the correction emails went out. Every client who had ever seen one of my mistakes received a formal statement. Due to internal misconduct by a former employee, certain documents were altered without authorization. Ms. Thompson was not responsible. Please disregard prior errors. It wasn't flowery, but it was enough. My inbox lit up with replies from clients, some apologetic, some simply relieved. The retroactive bonus hit my account 2 pay cycles later, more money than I'd ever seen in one deposit, enough to pay off the debt I'd quietly accumulated during the stress spiral, enough to breathe again. And the promotion? Official within a month. Senior project coordinator, with a team of juniors reporting directly to me. The same coworkers who once doubted me now came to me for guidance, and I gave it willingly, not out of bitterness, but because I wanted them to know they could trust me. As for Mark, his downfall was swift and brutal. Security had seized his laptop. It had uncovered more tampering than I'd even realized. Files altered, forwards sent to his girlfriend's account, even fragments of client data copied. Legal got involved. He wasn't just fired, he was terminated for cause, which in our industry is a scarlet letter. His LinkedIn went dark within days. A recruiter friend later told me his name was already circulating on a do not hire list. The girlfriend's freelance profile, banned from the client platform for data misuse, collateral damage he probably hadn't anticipated. I'd like to say I felt triumphant, but honestly, I felt steady, balanced, like the ground under my feet had finally stopped shifting. The best moment came quietly, 2 weeks later, when my manager stopped by my desk. No audience, no formalities, just him, hands in pockets, looking uncomfortable. "I should have trusted you sooner," he said. Then after a pause, "You handled this better than most people would have." I nodded once. That's because I knew the truth would hold. And it had. The storm had passed. The wreckage was cleared. And now, for the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I was looking ahead. The weeks after Mark's exit felt almost unreal, like I'd been living under a constant storm cloud and suddenly the sun had come out. No more whispered doubts when I walked into meetings. No more fake, helpful comments from him across the table. Just silence. And in that silence, something powerful. Respect. It started small. A junior associate stopped by my desk and asked, "Can you show me how you organize client threads? Yours always look clean." Another quietly slipped me a thank you note after I covered for her while she scrambled with a deadline. Piece by piece, I was no longer the person people avoided. I was the person they turned to, and I leaned into it, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to build something better out of the mess he'd made. I put together what I called the Inbox Integrity Playbook. It wasn't fancy, just a set of simple practices: how to track metadata, how to spot anomalies, how to lock down drafts. I shared it with my team, then with HR. 2 weeks later, it was adopted company-wide. Suddenly, my paranoia had a new name: best practice. Meanwhile, karma didn't stop with his termination. Word trickled back through the grapevine. His girlfriend's freelance contracts collapsed when clients discovered their data had been compromised. His name started surfacing on compliance watch lists. One rumor even said a former client had filed a civil complaint. I didn't celebrate, but I won't lie, it felt like balance being restored. He'd tried to bury me under lies, and instead he was the one sinking. As for me, the promotion shifted everything. I was leading meetings now. I was the one setting deadlines, approving deliverables, mentoring juniors. And the same people who once saw me as fragile or paranoid were now nodding when I spoke, taking notes when I suggested changes. That subtle shift, from questioned to trusted, was more satisfying than any title. But the real closure came in a quieter moment. One late evening, after everyone had left, I sat at my desk with the last pieces of my evidence log spread out. The screenshots, the server traces, the USB with the recording. My trophies, in a way. I slipped them into a labeled folder, sealed it, and locked it in my drawer. Not to gloat, not to wave around, but as a reminder. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been right. And then I closed the drawer, shut down my laptop, and walked out of the office. The building was quiet, as the parking lot half lit, the night air cool against my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking home under suspicion. I felt like I was walking forward, free, in control. No speech, no grand moment of revenge, just the simple, steady knowledge that the truth had survived, and so had I. The irony? If Mark had left me alone, I would have kept my head down forever. I would have been another name on the payroll, doing my job quietly. But by trying to destroy me, he'd forced me to rise, to protect myself, to lead, to stand tall. That was his final mistake, and my quiet victory.